Right, it's 9 o'clock on this Friday morning. Good morning, everybody. How's the panel going this morning?
Oh, good.
Great to see you all. Welcome, and welcome to all our guests from all over the countryside. And welcome to our guests from New Zealand, I believe, from the US, from Canada. Yeah, and I think we've got some from the UK as well, if I'm correct. And then obviously all our African friends, welcome, and looking forward to a good session. We're going to have a bit of a transition this morning between different presenters, so hopefully it goes smoothly. Technology tends to have its way, so let's jump into it. This morning we are going to be talking about risk management. Facing risk management, and what I've realized in the last while is risk management is such a massive topic. We're going to label this as risk management light, because and next week we'll do a follow-up. The risk management environment is so massive, and what we realized from a KEY360 perspective is to present it in a short amount of time is just about impossible. So we're going to be doing multiple sessions on risk management, because it covers all sorts of areas, including business continuity and project risk and business risk and cyber risk. So all of those different areas need to be taken care of. So without much further ado, the rules for the session, as usual, there are no rules. We encourage everybody, the attendees, to be part of the discussion. So please list your questions on the chat box, and the team and myself will be happy to share that and answer your questions. And please stay afterwards. We do have a KEY360 training session following on directly from this, so that'll be great. Behind the sticks this morning is Gerard Ulofse, who is our training executive, so he'll be making sure the tech works. My name is Stephen Golding, CEO and founder of KEY360 Management Platforms. Let's go. So our panel this morning, Johan will be online elsewhere, so he'll be joining in a second and taking over. Anzel, project consultant in KEY360, and John Schaefer, who is our operations manager, who is also here to speak on behalf of project management. So welcome everybody. Hopefully we have a great session. KEY360 is everybody's bucket list. So and this is not us talking. This is the response that we get from our clients. And when they see the expanse of what we do in KEY360 and the methodology that we've applied to it, that's pretty much what we understand. So feel free to get hold of us and have a look at what we're doing. It's a lot of fun, and we're driving businesses to a whole new transformational level in digitalization, but more importantly in behavior modification. So using technology to advance behavior inside an organization. Now, this morning, we're going to be jumping straight into the technology without too much interference. We need to get through a couple of things as we go, and then we will get to the podcast section directly afterwards. So, facing risk management is a huge topic, and in my personal opinion, it is so often sidelined in an organization. So why is risk management such a sidelined discipline when it should be right front and center, the top subject of every single board meeting and every single project meeting and every single construction meeting on the planet? So just a comment from our panel. John, why is risk management always this sidelined little exercise where you put a little risk together and it seems to just get lost somewhere in the organization.
I think people in organizations don't realize until something actually happens, they don't realize the impact that risk management has. I mean, from protecting your assets, ensuring business continuity, your reputation, there's so many aspects that is overseen as how actually important it is until something actually happens. So I think it's not it's such a sideline discipline because people don't always realize the massive impact it could have on your business.
So from my understanding or from my perspective is risk has to do with your three major project management areas, right? Your quality, your cost, and your time. So if you don't focus on your risk management, you're going to have a problem with either one of those three aspects. And the management and your project management team don't always necessarily have that in the back of their minds. So they do a little risk assessment. They think, okay, they've covered now all of the basics, but they don't actually follow through with the process and mitigate that risk and do a risk assessment again to see if there's new ones popping up so it doesn't affect your triple bottom line at the end of the day.
So I think that's...
Even
no, carry on, John.
For those who do it, assumes it's to comply, for compliance purposes.
Right.
We've done our risk assessment, so
we
comply. But the bigger picture is missed in this.
Yeah, and you know what? It makes me think of safety, because safety is often sort of done in the same way. When we do a safety risk assessment or a hazard risk assessment, it's pretty much the same thing. We're ticking the boxes, but the penny doesn't drop in terms of actually closing out that mitigation or that control or that cause and effect. And Anzel, you mentioned it. It's about process, right? So the process must be elevated and closed out so that it's not just listed, but we're actually closing out those items. So I just put this, had the slide in. I don't know how old project management is. Depends who you speak to. Obviously, Noah is one of the old guys in project management. But assuming the creation of the Earth, it may be a couple of 100,000 million years before that as well, when things were being built. So things happen on projects and in organizations, and you need to foresee what's happening. So it's a bit of a crystal ball situation, and those eventualities need to be structured and then managed effectively so that we have as smaller impact as possible on the outcome. Now, understanding that when we look at a process or an organization, and specifically a project, it's riddled with change, right? So change is the only reality that we sort of that we know we have to deal with. And if we can process that change into an organizational process, then pretty much we can control it, right? And if risk management is done effectively, there's absolutely no change which we shouldn't be able to handle, and that's all the way from sort of planned changes all the way to absolute disaster recovery. Because if risk management is run properly, we're actually foreseeing any opportunity and any risk that could happen in an organization, and then catering for that. All right, so that brings us to let's look into KEY360, because we're talking about the platform, and how does the platform actually facilitate this process of one, identifying issues, and two, getting those issues and opportunities right. Because risk is not just about the bad stuff, it's about the good stuff as well. We need to be able to identify risks and opportunities from certain sources, and I think that's a critical aspect of what we're looking at. Is when we look at the risk source, that must come from everywhere possible, right? So every avenue of the organization and every platform of the organization, we should be picking these things up, because that's the importance of actually identifying this crystal ball capability. So whether it's coming from external sources, or whether it's coming from access on the mobile app through the lessons learned, or whether it's coming from some sort of review, or every single meeting that is held in the organization, we should be identifying risk, plugging them into the system, and then assessing those on a consistent basis, right? And what's really important is knowing where we actually came from, because we need to be able to track, in terms of baselining, how we're actually improving and decreasing or managing the risk inside an organization. So that's risk management in a nutshell. We need to identify, we need to baseline those, and we're going to look at that in a second. And then we need to consistently assess and manage those risks, and then have a method of updating. So we need to take a snapshot of what it was last week or last month or yesterday, and then manage that new scenario into the next reporting section. And that's about managing residual, right? So all the mitigations, all the controls we have in place, we need to look at that and say, are we actually doing well in terms of how we're managing these risks? And that brings us to the bottom section here, which is very important. The first section in KEY360 is about risk rating. Okay, so we need to understand where we are and saying, well, when we've identified that risk, how does it categorize and how do we measure that? Now in KEY360 we can embed. We haven't found a risk management methodology or rating matrix which we couldn't adopt in KEY360. Okay, so that's very important. So it's not about changing what organizations are using. It's about using the platform to actually understand that process and adopt that process. The next issue is cause and effect, right? Because that sort of gives us the bottom section of where that risk should be assessed and how important is it to the organization, right? So that gives us a grading and says, right, well, what is this risk and where does it come from? What is the cause? What is the root cause of this? And immediately that needs to go into again, as Ansel mentioned, that needs to be processed into the organization in terms of procedures, in terms of immediate mitigation, etc. Then we need to look at the controls that are in place, right? And this is an ongoing process. Can we put controls in place like a barricade or some sort of immediate control to mitigate that risk? Okay, and typically those need to be assessed on a consistent basis so that we've got a control mechanism. Then we look at the mitigation outside of the controls, right? So there's a big hole in the road. We don't want people to fall into the hole. So we apply additional mitigation. We've got somebody with a flag, making sure that nobody drives past that point, even though we have a barricade, which is part of our normal controls process. And then after all that's said and done, we still need to look at the revised impact assessment to say, all right, well, after we've done all of these things, how do we actually see this risk? And then what is the connection with the original baseline and with the next month's version? And through process management, we then process this through KEY360. Now, KEY360 is extremely powerful in process management, business-to-business communication, and then making sure that all these dominoes fall in exactly the right process. So last week, we talked a lot about dominoes in the procurement process, because we need to make sure that all the different moving parts are connected correctly, and that eventually they all follow in the right sequence. So KEY360 is extremely good at that, and we're going to dive into that in a second. In terms of the process starting, there are various ways to start the process. And as I said, we pick them up from minutes of meeting. We pick risks up from board meetings, from things that we're seeing on site, from photographs, etc. All that information is already in KEY360. and it needs to be coordinated into a list. Right? So the risk management system and the lessons learned system you'll see on the mobile app here is available from everywhere. We have website access available from landing pages. And then all the information in KEY360 is also a prompt to get the information into either lessons learned or directly into a risk register, and then start processing those through the process. So I'm going to jump into KEY360 and take you through that view. Now, we'll know this image by now. We're going to be adjusting it a little over the next couple of weeks, but effectively KEY360 manages various elements of the organization. We're looking at a project view here. Over the next couple of weeks, we will be looking at KEY360 for operations, which is a whole different ball game, and new modules and maintenance management and business continuity, all sorts of exciting stuff, which you may not have seen if you're in the project management side of KEY360. But effectively, we're looking at portfolio management, we're looking at the gate model, and then we're looking at the project executions. So we're going to dive into the elements. For those of you not aware of KEY360, we have landing pages, and we have this horizontal menu across the top, which is our primary access into KEY360. These landing pages can be designed according to your organization. So I'm not going to go into that. You can watch the previous podcasts or the specific podcasts about how to get into KEY360 and what's really happening. It's really cool. It's really funky. You can build your own landing pages, your own branding, your own quirky styles, etc., to get your organization running in a digitalized environment. Right. So we're going to jump into risk management here. I'm clicking on the button, and we're jumping into the project universe risk. Again, the process, as I've described it, is about risk baselining. It's about cause and effect. It's about controls. It's about mitigation, and then the impact assessment. But workflow is important. So I'm going to start out with the lessons learned section. And as we've seen in KEY360, it's an extremely versatile environment, allowing us to create views on a per user level about how the project works together, and then jumping into a specific risk. So I'm going to start out here with a classic project risk, which everybody knows about. I'm just filtering here for a geotech. Right now, a geotech is a classic project risk. We were supposed to build the plant here. We did a beautiful value engineering exercise. We saved $100 million, and we moved the plant a couple of meters to the left because it seemed like a good idea at the time. We didn't follow the normal processes during the feasibility study, and now we've got a geotech which doesn't quite align, right? So that should have been in a lessons learned, right? And here's the lessons learned, and the geotech was done, but it was done in the wrong spot. So this is a typical scenario that we have in projects, and there are a million different versions of these, from the most simple thing to the most complex thing. So loading a risk or a lessons learned in KEY360 is extremely easy in terms of mapping out the proposed solution, the specific metrics around, what are the characteristics, what is the consequence of this lesson, what is the actual issue, the root cause, what is the impact, severity, costing, etc. So I'm not going to go into that too much. And then we need to look at the workflow, right? So the workflow in terms of lessons learned, and I've got a very simple workflow designed here, capturing the lesson, then assessing that lesson, and making sure that risk is actually captured, right? So as soon as a lesson is learned or a lesson is listed, we need to connect to the risk register and say, well, is this a problem right now, which we need to still address from a risk perspective? Then we're looking at things like procedure updates, right? So we can immediately start influencing other business processes in the organization through the lessons learned register. So depending on the workflow that you design into KEY360, you can actually influence this process. And then going into what we call lessons learned. So listing lessons is one thing, but lessons learned is a totally different ballgame, because we've actually got to embed that learning and close out that lesson so that we never see it again, right? So that's the trick, and the beauty of using KEY360 as a platform is you can actually design that embedding out into the organization. And this may include change management, this may include adoption of new technologies, whatever the requirement is to eliminate this lesson or eliminate this risk or optimize this opportunity. KEY360 can facilitate that process out of the organization. So we go through this process, and at one stage, we're actually capturing that as a risk. So I'm going to jump across to the risk register. And let me just take off this filter here. So in the risk register, again, we talked about baselining. So this whole risk register is compiled against different categories inside the organization. Now, we've got extensive capability to categorize these risks, right? There's an endless capability of making sure that we know exactly where this risk is coming from, where it's going to, what is the different elements of that, all the way down to, even is our mitigation going to work, and is it working? If we've implemented it, how's it working? So it's a totally ongoing process of managing all this information into workflow. So I'm going to filter again for that specific risk, which is that geotech problem, and then highlighting the specific aspects of that. So in KEY360, let me just bump up the resolution here so that you can see what's going on. So in KEY360, we also have charting capability. So you can really adjust the charts. Now, let me just adjust this view again, because the charts adapt to the filters that I've got going inside KEY360. So you'll be able to see that there is an endless amount of charting inside the platform to actually analyze risk rating, risk impacts. Where's this actually coming from? There's the geotech, which is causing us so much headaches in terms of risk severity, etc. So there's an endless potential of graphics and visual impact that we can apply. And as with our audience, our panel audience, you'll see behind them there's a set of screens and panels, right? John, Anzel, yeah, thank you very much. Beautiful, lovely, yeah. So exposing this information to the organization through dashboards and through different methods is extremely important, right? So KEY360 provides the engine with which to build what we call IOCs, so integrated operation centers. So as we would have a control room on a normal plant, we actually build control rooms from normal organizations, and they may be small organizations or they may be massive organizations. We have the ability to coordinate all this data over 200 systems and put them into a visual aspect, either at the coffee area or inside the boardroom or on your mobile device, on your PC. So flooding the organization with this type of information and the risk information becomes an ongoing culture change to manage risk. And this is extremely important, right? So I want to jump into that specific risk again. Let's go back and find our geotech. So I'm filtering for that geotech investigation. And what we find is that the geotech was done, which pretty much says, well, we've covered all the bases, right? Now, that's not the case, because we need to take this a step further. The geotech was invalid because we actually moved the plant during some sort of a value engineering exercise. Now, this is a fictitious example, but it's a very good example of how particular and how specific we need to talk about how risks are actually identified and located. So going through this specific risk, what we see is, again, we've got a status management capability. So let me just run up there. again, KEY360 is driven by workflow. So making sure we've got a handle on the different processes and the different timelines around those processes. So KEY360 will highlight any days that are highlighted. Now, this is demo information, so this specific item was lying dormant for 3,509 days. Now, that's obviously not very good. So nobody's watching this project. It is a demo project, but it's a very important metric that is dashboarded out of KEY360 all the time on every single process. Now, I want to demonstrate that by just scrolling down to the engine which drives the process of risk management, right? So cause and effect, controls, mitigation, and impact assessment. And this is a progressive view. So when we're analyzing this information, we can say, right, cause and effect, what are the causes and effect of that item? And we can list as many as we like. So adding cause and effect, what is the cause name? Where did it come from? What is the root cause of that item? And what is the severity of that? Collated into various metrics and costs, etc. So eventually we can look at all the cause and effects in a single register. So if I jump into here, there's a register of all the cause and effects of the whole risk register. So it's a multiplication of this capability. So let's say if we're looking for design issues in cause and effect, and with KEY360 we can then filter and specifically target cause and effect from a departmental perspective. So we could say, well, this, Mr. Engineering Manager, are all the risks that you should be managing, and we don't want to see this again inside your specific department. So with KEY360, we can really drive out an outcomes-based situation where we're managing this data extensively. And again, if we put this information up in terms of an IOC or our dashboarding, this then becomes a culture of the organization to eradicate risk, evaluate, mitigate, put controls in place. So all of these aspects are extremely important in making sure that we are consistently driving out a new risk baseline out of the organization. And this is an ongoing process. It's not a once-off, it's not a once-a-month exercise. We need to have the processes in place where it's a consistently managed environment. And it's exactly the same as quality management. It's exactly the same as health and safety management throughout an organization. You need the platform technology, which is set up very simply. KEY360 is extremely easy to set up, which drives up the processes, the domino effect of just getting things done in a certain fashion and passing the baton, so to speak, to the next person in the list. So from cause and effect, we go to controls, and controls is about the normal processes and procedures that we have in place. Now, obviously, related attachments and reference documents are important here because controls are often designed around documentation and procedures and specifications and standard operating procedures. So all of these things can be connected here, and we can make sure that we've got all those in place. And if they're not in place, obviously, then we need a mitigation, which says we need a revised SOP for this specific item, right? And KEY360, as we've seen in the previous podcasts, is all connected. So the risk management is connected to document management. So all of this becomes a combined organism which runs your organization and runs through the domino effect, making sure things happen. So again, when we look at controls, we look at the controls assessment. We look at how effective those controls are. So we can literally look on a week-by-week basis. Are our controls effective? Is this a process which is working? And is it decreasing the impact of the risk? And then we go to mitigation, which is exactly the same. Looks at a different perspective of the same cube to say, okay, once we've got our controls in place, how do we add additional, maybe once off, or maybe then permanent mitigation so that we can actually decrease our risk impact. Now, as I said in the beginning of the podcast, very important is this methodology can be applied to every single risk category in the organization, whether it's cyber risk or whether it's business continuity or whether it's your data flowing around in the organization or whether it's the road health safety outside your building. So all of these aspects can be combined into a risk matrix. And as John indicated in the beginning, there's a compliance issue as well, and an international standards issue as well in terms of managing risk according to good practice, right? And that it's not a once-off process. I'm going to be handing over to Johan Mostert now. Johan, are you online and ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Right. Johan, if you can jump online and then handle impact assessment. I've actually got to run to another client who's insisted that this podcast is less important than getting KEY360 up and running for his organization. So that's why I've got my shirt and my button-up shirt on today. So I've got to run to a client who's only got an hour for a KEY360 intro, but he's insistent that he needs it up and running by Monday. So really, we've got a good weekend ahead of us. Johan, thank you. Panel, you're still going to be involved and asked a couple of questions. Thank you for everybody who took the time to attend. I hope you enjoy the rest of the session and have a couple of questions answered. This is KEY360 Lite. We are going to be branching out into a deep dive into KEY360 risk management. So watch this space. Thanks, Johan, and thanks, Martinez. You can take over the controls.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So, risk assessment. What is risk assessment? Impact. It's a process used in risk management to evaluate the potential consequences or effect of identified risk on a project, organization, objectives, and so forth. It involves analyzing a lot of magnitude of the impact of risk, even could have its where it occurs. So the purpose of the risk impact assessment is to prioritize all those risks. And that is so important that it is basically based on the potential severity and likelihood of occurrences, enabling organizations to allocate resources and development of appropriate risk response strategies. So basically, there are a number of steps also that usually takes place. And this is so important. It is to identify these risks, beginning with identifying the potential risk that could impact the project, organization, or objective. Sometimes it involves quite a lot of brainstorming sessions, historical data that needs to be looked at, expert judgments, risk assessment techniques such as risk matrices. And then the next step is to define those impact criteria by establishing the criteria for evaluating those impact and identify risks. Impact, those criteria may include factors such as financial consequences. We've seen a lot of this happening on most of the projects through my experience, through a lot of projects that I've been involved with. Schedule delays, a massive impact. Resource allocations, that's usually when change management or issues that occurs on sites where resources are removed or reallocated when there's a change in the schedule, reputation damages, safety hazards, another big one, regularity, compliances, and customer satisfaction, which is another most important thing. And then we go to the assessment of that impact magnitude, evaluating that potential magnitude or severity of the impact of each identified risks. This also may involve the qualitative assessment, quantitative analysis, and combination of both approaches depending on the nature of risk available data. Then quantitative analysis also then being used in the impact assessment. This impacts such as financial risks and schedule delays, as I've mentioned. The Monte Carlo simulations can be used to estimate the potential financials. Qualitative analysis is the fifth step to follow. This is the tangible impacts such as reputation damages, non-compliance, and risk matrices, scoring, expert judgments. And then the sixth step is considering the probability in addition to impact magnitude, consider likelihood. So all of this can all be built into KEY360, which forms part of the process flow in your status history of KEY360. And as Stephen nicely indicated, it is so important that a list of potential risk and cost schedule or any other critical success factor is a key great risk of management. And that's why it's so important to have all these checklists in a good resource, to have lessons learned and create lists of all the risks over time. And it's not always easy to build these lists because it gets big, but it's to stick to the most important stuff. And having a good list will support the stakeholders in at risk management in any organization. And obviously those inputs that are so important, we have to have the management plan in place. We have to have your schedule management plan, your cost management plan, quality management plan, and resource management plan, your risk management plan, and so we can carry on. And then from the panel, what would you see as well in this risk management that you would like to add that I might have missed here?
Hi, Mercy. Yes, so what the question I receive a lot from clients is basically the setup and how to get started on your risk management plan. There is so much information out there about how to build your heat map, right? And each company has different heat maps because of different requirements. What would, in your opinion, be the best, how a client can actually go about it to create the perfect one for them with their risk management plan?
Sorry, just repeat. I just lost my signal there. Just that last question.
So most clients struggle with creating their risk management plan. And the reason for that is because of the heat maps that is different for each organization due to their different requirements. So I get asked the question a lot about how to actually help them in order to get the perfect one for them.
There are many ways of heat maps that can be built. Heat maps usually has from 1 to 25, from your lowest to your highest critical heat maps. And then usually the 4 colors are used, which is your green, your yellow, your orange, and then obviously your reds. And there are so many ways in which these can be built. And KEY360 has the adaptability to use those calculations where you can actually set up that type of rating. So such as, if I can open this, here's an example of a risk rating where you have your lowest, as you can give it a scoring from 1 to 5 and then 6. And then through those evaluations, the scoring that you do or the selection that you use from your probability, and what your impact would be, would then do the calculation. And this is adaptable to any company's decision of how they would manage a risk scoring heat map. And there is no rules to it. I think a lot of people would manage a risk just to point out the risk that they see as important in a scoring from 1 to 5, and then obviously if you go into that such a deep level that you would use this risk scoring from 1 to 25 in KEY360. So it's very adaptable that you can add and as color it the way that the risk heat map would look like. So if I can go to as an example, there is where you can use an example of the various risk maps that can be used in KEY360. So on the control side, then we move obviously to the control side, and just want to. So we've now discussed the mitigation part, and now there's the control side. This is where you've identified, assessed the risks, and you prioritized your mitigation actions, and you implemented the mitigations, and then obviously you communicated the mitigation risk processes. So now on the control is now to take control of your risk. It involves implementing measures to monitor and evaluate and adjust those risk responses through the project organization lifecycle. It aims to ensure that identified risks are effectively managed and controlled, and then obviously to minimize the impact on project success and organizational objectives. So the steps that you would take in, especially when it comes to the controlling of your risk, is to establish the control measures, and through that you control your measures and mechanisms to monitor and manage those identified risks, and may include like your procedures, your process, your policies, your tools, your techniques, and then that triggers the assessing risk status and implement of risk responses. And then obviously then you assign your responsibilities for implementing the overseeing risk control activities to the individual or teams within the organization. So clearly it defines then your roles and responsibilities, and ensuring that all stakeholders understand their roles in managing and controlling these risks. So monitoring the risk triggers is also then continuously being monitored, and identify changes to the risk conditions and emergence from the risk. So the risk triggers may include changes like your project scope, your budget, your schedule, and stakeholder requirement and market conditionals of your external factors. And then obviously you're going to evaluate your risk status that Stephen has then indicated on your within KEY360 on your status history, where you are regularly assess those status on identifying the risk to determine whether they are being effectively managed and controlled. So it evaluates the effective of the risk response strategies and mitigation measures in reducing risk exposure and preventing adverse outcomes. So then obviously we implement the corrective actions. So then we would take corrective actions as needed to address the changes of the risk conditions or deviation of the risk management plan. So we then adjust the risk responses strategies, mitigation measures, or project plans to address the new risk or changing those circumstances very effectively. Communication in risk information, that is also very important, because in that way you communicate the information status updates and control those measures to stakeholders, project teams, and relevant parties, and within your team, and as well as the the construction site managers more effectively, and then you can mitigate those efforts and effectiveness of those control measures. And then obviously the most important one is to document control these activities. The document control activities include all those risk assessments, monitoring all those results, corrective actions that was taken, the outcomes, especially when it comes to plans and that at the end of a project that could affect if these risks won't adhere to. And then maintain those accurate and up-to-date records of risk-related information in future reference reporting. And that's where it comes to your lessons learned. So we move back to the lessons learned, and which a lot of projects tend to forget about those lessons. And it is so important. It's a vicious circle. And then obviously at the end, we review and improve by conducting regular reviews and we then do the continuous improvement, foster those culture of condition improvements by encouraging feedback, innovation, and learning experience. And this is the only way that it promotes collaboration and knowledge sharing amongst project teams to leverage the insight and the best practice for managing and controlling risk effective by following these steps. So yeah, and basically here's an example of what you're facing in risk management is to do those setups in your lessons learned, where it starts off by setting up your group sources, impact type, impact severity, and rating. And through those are linked then in your lessons learned that where you can work from this technique or platform that you can transfer over to, as Stephen indicated, into your risk management module and then being managed up. So the setup and preparation is according to your requirements, and obviously what usually are the most set rules in certain risk management laws are. Then basically before you have your risk resources baseline, your risk assessment, and then your version is obviously you can set it if it was like a weekly, monthly, and manage those in residual impact. And then all you end up with your rating, cause, controls, mitigation, and impact assessment all in place to manage your risk management effectively. And then an example of what our mobile app that is just as effective. So on the move, you are able to use the mobile to add a risk when you're on site and you're not with your PC, and you can work offline to request like what the new risk that was identified. And so from the panel, your view on the mobile app, how do you see the mobile app, especially in a risk management environment?
So the mobile app is quite a very nice tool to have, because you have your mobile on your person the whole day. So if you quickly spot a risk on site or on the field, then you can go in, log the necessary or the basic information, and then just have it there so that you can throw it afterwards.
Yeah, you can take photos of it and log it. It's a powerful tool. We've seen it now in the mines where they use it underground. The Wi-Fi they've got underground, they list the risks immediately, and it's addressed accordingly.
Thank you. So yeah, that is the mobile app that is so powerful, and as we can say, it's very powerful in the sense of you can always go back to your system and then update according to where it then gets managed. And we've got obviously the email system, which can also be used in order to add that risk into KEY360, and then obviously the dashboards that we can pull up and to be able to see which are your highest risks according to your risk value ratings, and which are the important ones that needs attention as soon as possible, especially when it comes to um, the effect of the schedule impact and cost impact, and maybe incidents that can occur. And then obviously, and how it gets reported. And then obviously, as well as Stephen said, workflow. Workflow is very important in order to have that process smoothly run right to the end until that risk is closed or added to the lessons learned to ensure that next project can run that risk more effectively instead of what the experiences of previous projects feedback provided. So how do we, from the panel, how do we approach, okay, we've done the mitigation. I think we've actually gone through the entire KEY360. It's very adaptable. And I would just like to say on this, if you would like to know more on KEY360, please also to stay on the chat, so we can have it answer all of the questions, and we can just show you a little bit more in detail in KEY360 what you can and cannot do. And is there any questions? As I've got just a few more questions just after that for the panel, but I don't know if there's any from anybody anywhere on the group that would like to ask a question. Yes.
Fine.
If there's anything you would like to add from the panel side?
Yeah, Johan.
Yes.
Why would you say does risk have such a low profile in projects?
The reason why I see that as a very low is because people tend to forget about risk. Risk just gets ignored by a lot of people, and people just carry on with their normal daily businesses, and people don't like to actually manage risk. They take it as a backseat in project management. So the focus is on execution. Project managers and teams often prioritize meeting deadlines, staying within budgets, and delivering projects requirements. The focus is more on execution, which can lead to risk management being overlooked and treated as a secondary. And then obviously your limited resources. That's another reason as well. In many projects, resources such as time, budget, personnel are constrained. Project managers may allocate resources primarily to tasks directly related to project delivery, leaving limited capacity for comprehensive risk management activities. And then obviously the short-term perspective, that's another reason. Projects are typically undertaken to achieve specific objectives, optimism bias, lack of awareness of training, and then the perception on complexity of risk management. So risk management can be perceived as a complex and time-consuming, especially in projects with tight deadlines and limited resources. So this is my view in how I would see it. So yes.
I have another question that I also get a lot from clients is because they have minimal resources and they understand that the risk management process is an important one, but they say they just don't have the time or the resources. So do you feel that companies should actually try and invest in actual specialized people to do their risk assessments and keep them in the loop? Or do you feel it's still an internal thing that they just have to employ people with that specifications and qualifications in order to get their risk management to a higher level?
It is the problem is if you get specialists within it, it's very costly. But if you have the correct team together, that's why you have your stakeholders, you have your project team, you have your team members, and by doing an assessment through this process, you get more a result at the end of the day. And I think it is very important to you make use of your team that is available, because it doesn't mean that to get a specialist out, that the specialist knows the detail of that moment, what that risk that was raised. I've had it a lot of times. We've had specialists in, and it just ended up going into a lot of circles because of the entities available. But I think with putting everybody together, you can get a good result at the end of the day, and everybody knows that same people that's usually on that project might move over to the next project and already know how to control that risk. And then I would also, just another question I would like to ask the panel is, what do you think we learn from lessons learned?
What do we learn?
Yeah, so
Doing your lessons learned properly, you avoid making the same mistakes. You plan upfront for them. An overall result in cost savings, having more resources available for your project, saving time, reputation. So doing your lessons learned properly, you possibly could result in not doing the same mistakes.
Correct, yes. Yeah, because I see it as well. I mean, it can end up with a lack of documentation. I mean, if there was no documentation that supported those lessons learned, obviously you're going to pick up these issues. And time constraints. That's another one. Time constraint is also a big thing in lessons learned. And I see we've got 3 minutes left. And then obviously quickly, then the failure analysis, root causes, and the resistance to change, which is a big thing. People tend to have a lot of resistance to those changes. And then the silos and the communication barriers, as well as the ineffective feedback loops, and obviously the over-reliance in technology. That's another one. So to address these challenges in organizations, I think we need to prioritize the institutions in culture and learning the continuous improvement of risk. So from the panel, is there, in summary, what you would like to put down? How would you summarize risk management before we say goodbye?
So risk management, in summary, is literally the process that you need to follow to identify your risk, to analyze them, to mitigate them, to control them, so that your impact at the end of the time is so low that you don't waste time, resources, money, and the quality of what you are trying to do all in one. So you need to make that as low as possible. And that is what your risk management plan will do.
I was to say, I'd like to add with that, it enables an organization to navigate through all the uncertainties that you're going to face throughout this project, seize them as opportunities and achieving your goals.
Yes, absolutely. And just basically, just this can cause a big impact. If you do not have all this in place, it can have a huge impact in risk management by means of enhancing your decision. It would support actually across the various dimensions and enhancing your decision making and improve your performances. It will protect your assets, your compliance and governance, your innovation and growth, and cost savings, and resilience of adaptability, and then obviously your competitive advantages. But thank you very much. I appreciate you. It was risk is not always the easiest subject to take on in any company. And as I've said, this is why lessons learned is so important, to start working from that perspective through your risk management. And yes, hopefully we can always adapt more to this environment instead of just hoping that a project can finish without any risks, which is impossible. So I would like to thank the panel and all the audience that have attended this session. If there are any other questions that you would raise, please send us a mail. We do have a platform where you can add your questions, and we would like to respond to those questions and assist you. But for those who would like to know more and see more of the information on KEY360, you're welcome to stay behind. Thank you from all over the world. Have a nice day, morning, evening. Bye.